Conscious Creative from MuseWorks Audio. The Conscious Creative is a podcast featuring interviews with artists who are doing transformational work in their craft and in their communities. Join us as we discuss different artistic philosophies, give you brand new tools to bring back to your creative spaces, and build a community of artists dedicated to deepening their relationship with their craft. I'm your host, Mike Irish. Thank you for joining us. Jess Porter is the co-founder and bass player for the prog rock band Inuette, host of the podcast We Don't Believe in Beatles and the Queer Idea, as well as a solo artist. Jess and I sat down to talk about the history of Inuette, their new album, the first season of his podcast dedicated to reviewing the solo work of the Beatles, as well as some of the technical aspects of recording an entire album live. I really enjoyed this chat. As always, Jess and I go back quite a few years. I haven't caught up with him for quite a while, so it was really nice to just sit down and hear about what he's been up to creatively. He's tremendously skilled musician. I always think it's interesting to pick brains of people who are so skilled and just have a slightly different way of looking at things. Before we get into the episode, I want to take a moment to talk about my friends over at Soundfly. They make incredible online music courses that you can take either on your own with a low-cost subscription or one-on-one with a professional mentor helping you every step of the way. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure but for music education. You can learn beat making, mixing, songwriting, composing, arranging, synths, home recording, anything. If you go the mentor route, they'll build a customized learning plan around your personal goals and needs and provide you with in-depth feedback on your work. But if you don't want that hands-on support, the courses are creative and niche enough for you to find your groove and have fun doing it at your own pace. Whether you want to learn how to orchestrate for a string ensemble, build a low-end heavy trap beat in Ableton Live, or brush up on your harmonic theory to make more compelling and emotive music, there's definitely a course for you. And I've partnered with them to give you 15% off your monthly subscription. So just head over to soundfly.com to sign up and enter code CreativePod15 to let them know I sent you and to start improving on all the musical things that you've always wanted to learn. And finally, before we get into the show, I want to mention that I'm currently booking for 2021 post-production work. As an audio engineer, I aim to help artists through this often tough creative process and transform your art into its fully realized vision. If you're looking for an audio engineer that not only knows how to turn the dials, but has a spiritual and deeply emotional connection with the music he works on, go to www.museworksaudio.com and request a quote to find out if my service is right for you. Now, without further ado, let's get into the show with Jess Porter. Welcome, Jess, to The Conscious Creative. I appreciate you taking the time, and it's been a few years since we caught up, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about everything you're up to and what you've been up to and what's happening in the future for you as well, man.
It's such a pleasure to talk to you, Mikey. It's been too long.
It has.
We go back a while.
Yeah. Oh, man. Speaking of going back a while, I would love for you to introduce all the members of your band Inuette and how everybody met, because I know there's some good stories in there as well.
Sure. So Inuette goes back ages. So I used to be in a band called Double Handed, which was like a kind of prog metal thing. Me and Cameron Sanderson, who was my longtime collaborator. We used to be in this band Double Handed. It's very metal. And then we started to kind of get a bit full of ourselves and wanting to explore like more, pretentious music and, kind of electronic music and, kind of like when bedroom albums started to become like really popular. And also like kind of everyone who was into heavy music wanted to eventually move into like Radiohead imitation. So like we kind of went in that direction, but the rest of the band were just not interested. They were just like, if it's not riffs, fuck off. We don't want to hear it. So we were just like, fine, we'll do it ourselves. And so we got in our bedroom and we started messing around with like, we made the first couple of records on like Reason. And so we started making music through Reason. And then we just kind of put out these few like kind of short EPs under the name Inuette. And yeah, the name is just like the feminized version of the word Inuit. And of course, but it's made up, so it's great. It's very easily Googleable. That was the by that. But then, so what we found is we were making these records. We'd made 3, and then me and Cam went to Iceland with a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Jack Gilligan, so you and me and him obviously met in Australia while you were all traveling. And me, Cam, and Jack went to Iceland together. And while in Iceland, we decided to make a Caribbean themed record for some reason. So we made this like album that's supposed to sound, it's called Inuette at the Beach. And it's supposed to sound like kind of like a holiday. It's kind of like a joke album, really. But Jack ended up kind of collaborating with, while we were kind of recording, like literally on the road with a few little tiny recorders. We like recorded the upright piano that was in one of the hostels we were staying at. And we recorded we recorded this amazing cough that Jack let out while we were trying to track ukulele. And then we ended up sampling the cough and making it into a drum beat. And so like Jack's cough is the backbone of this amazing Inuit track on that album called Havana Blast. And anyway, long story short, when we then settled in London, me and Cameron moved to London together. We're like, well, we've got these 4 albums with songs that are like reasonably good, we think. Let's make a band. And me and Cam had always been traditionally guitar players. And we were like, we want to make a band, but neither of us wants to play guitar. So we wanted to play something else. So I decided to play bass because I'd played a lot of bass on the Inuit records. Cam was really into ukulele. So he bought an electric uke and he was like, okay, I'll play uke and some keyboards. And then I was like, well, I know a drummer and it's Jack, because we were just traveling with him. And he was like, well, when I was traveling in Thailand 6 years ago, I met a guitar player who lives in London who was like, if you're ever in London, want to start a band. So he called up his mate, Sam. And so me, Sam, Cam, and Jack got in a room together. And within about half an hour, Jack and Sam realized that their old bands had used to play together, even though they'd never met. They like knew each other. They had a whole bunch of mutual friends. And it was just one of those things where like, as soon as we all picked up our instruments, it was so good. It was just instant kind of musical connection. So that's how kind of Inuit as it is now was born after, we first started tracking songs in 2008, 2009. We put out our first record in 2012. And now we're an actual band that was 2015 when we started jamming as the 4 of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you guys, I didn't realize that Jack had worked on Having a Blast, because I'd listened to that album. And I, for some reason, I thought it, had come out before you had even met Jack. Right. So I didn't realize that he was collaborating on that. And I also didn't realize that you guys went to Iceland together. What did you guys go there for?
Yeah. So just for a trip. Yeah. I just really wanted to go. There was this music festival on. Cameron was like, well, we hadn't seen each other in a couple of years because he was traveling. And I was like, well, let's go to this festival together. And then Jack was like, I'll come to that. And I was like, okay, yeah. Like we kind of hadn't really planned it. And then the next week he got back to me. He's like, I bought a ticket to that festival. I was like, oh, I guess we're going. Okay, great. And so that's kind of how it happened. And yeah. And then, yeah, because the cover art for Havana Blast I'm very proud of it. Sorry, for Inuit at the Beach. I'm very proud of it. It's done like a postcard and it says like Inuit at the Beach at the top. But it's a photo of us in our basically our pajamas, standing on like the rocky shore of the North Icelandic Sea, looking really unhappy. Yeah. And it's just it's so dumb. I love it. I'm so proud of it. And Jack took that photo. He was the photographer.
Nice. I'm glad that connection's made on the cover, because immediately when you told me that it was written in Iceland, I was like, I like that. A Caribbean themed album is written in Iceland.
It's very silly.
So you guys also you have a podcast as well. Is that all the members of Inuit?
No, it's not. It's not Sam, but that's not because we love him any less. It was just that when we were in lockdown in London, me and Cam were living together. Jack was around the corner, and then it got to a point where we were allowed to socialize with one other household. So we were like, okay, let's we can go hang out with Jack again. And then we'd been thinking about doing this podcast for a while. And the premise behind the podcast is Jack was getting to the point where he was trying to make us listen to all these records that the Beatles had put out after the Beatles broke up. So all the Wing stuff and the Lennon stuff and McCartney and blah, blah. And, he's like, have you heard this album? Have you heard John Lennon's Mind Games? Have you heard, Ringo. And we're like, no, Jack, we haven't heard them. And then eventually Cameron was like, well, what about we listen to them like a week at a time and we can talk about them on a podcast? Like that'll be a good kind of opportunity to have a reason to delve into them. Jack being someone who had a lot of kind of knowledge about these records already, he kind of comes at it from the point of view of the expert. And then me and Cam are like, this is what we thought listening to it for the first time in 2020 with a bit of context around, you know, looking back 50 years later. And then, yeah, we didn't kind of realize it was the 50-year anniversary of like when the Beatles broke up. So it's like a lot of these albums are 50 years old this year, which is amazing. Some of them are just, they're albums I'd never really heard. And some of them are just fantastic. So yeah, really, really great stuff. So I'm really glad to have had a reason to delve. Some of it's trash, but a lot of it is really good. Yeah.
What was your like favorite or top three maybe out that you guys went through, would you say?
So I know universally George Harrison's All Things Must Pass record, which was kind of his first proper solo album, is like very universally acclaimed. And we all really, really love that. Jack's always loved it. I'd never heard it, but it was a real trip to listen to that for the first time. For me, Paul McCartney's Ram is fantastic. It's really weird and kind of quite DIY. It's kind of a collaboration with his first wife, Linda, who's just like a really interesting creative. And yeah, like at the time it was really panned, but I think it was just like very misunderstood and kind of like out of time, maybe a little bit of ahead of its time. And also probably Lennon's first album, which is called Plastic Ono Band, is really, really great as well. It's like, it made me appreciate him in a way that I don't think I had before. Like it's very bare bones. It's very powerful. Like his lyrics are just so striking and kind of out there. So yeah, probably those three.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check those out. I honestly don't know a ton about the Beatles, and especially not what they did after the Beatles. So yeah, I'll look forward to checking that out.
Yeah, man. Do it. I think everyone, like a lot of, I don't know if your parents kind of brought you up on the Beatles at all, but mine definitely did a little bit. Yeah. But I think everyone goes through, well, a lot of people go through that stage as an adult that they kind of rediscover the Beatles on their own terms. And it's a real kind of like, oh, they're not just that band that I know all the songs of. They're like genuinely great. And yeah, so I do recommend it. Yeah.
Moving on to Inuette and your guys' music, you just recorded a live album this summer, was it? Or yeah.
Northern Hemisphere summer. I'm obviously in Australia now again. I've had 3 summers. This is my 3rd summer in a row this year, so It's not been bad. Sorry to rub it in.
So yeah, how, I know that you've been involved in the creation of quite a few albums. So I'm curious about how doing a live album felt compared to doing a studio album.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for Inuit, it wasn't that much of a stretch. Like we recorded our last LP, Wild Rooster, pretty much all live. Like we tracked everything in a room. Jack doesn't like playing to a click track, so we did it all, with his internal metronome, which is incredible. So the drums that you hear on that album are all like just take straight through with the band playing in the room. We kept some of the tracking that we kind of played along with, but then we redubbed kind of a lot of the bass and the guitars and the keys and violin and all that. But, we kind of were used to playing in a room and kind of creating that vibe. And so when it came to doing this, it wasn't actually originally supposed to be a record, but we just wanted to do a live show because one of the reasons I kind of went back to London this year was to do some reunion kind of gigs with Inuit. But we couldn't do them obviously because, that thing that happened this year. So when we could finally get back in a room together, it was like, okay, let's film something. Let's kind of film our creative space. And we were really proud of the music we were kind of putting together. So we're like, let's kind of film it all properly and put it on YouTube. And that'll be kind of our, like, at least to feel like we've done something with this year, But Sam's a producer as well, has done some fucking fantastic records. And he brought his kind of portable rig and set up, not super amount of mics. Like we just mic'd up the amps and then there was, I don't know, overheads on the drums and a kick. I think that's it. and a room mic, I think. And we just tracked everything. And it was basically so, we just had like good audio for the recording, for the video. But he sent over some of the kind of mixes a month or so ago, and I was just like, this is great. Like, we should just put this out everywhere, as audio and video. So we just decided to like think, why not? Like, everything's a bit DIY these days, and it captures, we don't want to be too polished because we're not that polished a band. Like, a lot of this record is improvised. Well, not a lot, but there's like some pretty extended passages that are completely improvised music that is written, on the spot for this record, and some reimagining of a lot of our older songs in ways that are that I think people will find really interesting. So I guess we really wanted to capture that in the moment energy, but also not have it too polished. Like, there's a lot of kind of us just talking shit, but and we're not kind of putting on the facade of being on stage at all. Like, it's just in a room. So yeah. But still wearing silly costumes and
yeah. And anyone who's ever heard Jack Gilligan talk shit knows that they're in for a treat.
Apologize to you. Yeah.
Oh man, so cool.
Yeah.
I have a question. How long were you guys in that room for?
So that was our regular rehearsal space, and we just did it once a week for about 5 or 6 hours. And the album was recorded in 2 sessions. So we did basically, like, we're like half instrumental, I guess, our band. And so one week we did the instrumental stuff, and the next week we did the vocal stuff, so that we could, set up the vocal mics and kind of get that vibe. So, so it was only, I think we did like 3 takes of a couple of songs, but I'd say the majority of the album is first takes. Like, we just played it. Yeah. Cause we'd just been rehearsing for like months, and we're feeling really confident, and yeah, smashed it. There's some wrong notes, but like, that's kind of part of the fun.
From the one song that I heard, I mean, I'm by no means like, I don't understand theory, but yeah. I can feel the energy of songs and the way that it moves throughout the song. And I really enjoyed the different like energetic exchanges and like the changes in you know what I mean, right?
Thanks, man. Yeah, absolutely. Like, because we're a prog band, basically. We're kind of prog rock. But I don't listen to a huge amount of prog rock because a lot of it is really pretentious and really self-serious. And I feel like we're like prog rock by like Weezer, LCD Sound System, in a way that's kind of not too serious, like kind of, and always having a good time. Like, it's the kind of band that I find myself smiling a lot when I'm playing. And I always want to kind of produce something that gives people a vibe, rather than like shoegaze music that's kind of a bit more about, internal processing, or like, getting too, I don't know, wrapped up in the technicality of it. Like, a lot of our stuff is just quite straightforward. I mean, the song I sent you is quite complex in its like rhythms and stuff, but it still is groovy. I think it still has a groove. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And that was something I wanted to say as well, is like, you guys definitely never take yourselves too seriously, which is so much fun, like, Jack's in a zebra dress. Are you wearing a bathrobe, like a very colorful bathrobe?
Excuse me, it was a sequined kimono.
My mistake.
Yeah, it's my festival wear.
Nice. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like it was probably so much fun to record, and I'm excited to hear the rest of it as well, man.
Sweet, man. I'm excited to get it out there.
Yeah. You kind of delved a little bit into the technical side, but I'd be curious if you could break it down a little bit more for people who are listening that maybe want to do a DIY record like this. Is there any advice that you would give to them, or anything like that?
I think the biggest thing to remember, like, it's funny because I feel like I'm thinking back to the first time I recorded demos with my band and stuff, and, like early recording experiences. And I feel like we did so much more. Like, we set up more microphones, we tracked more guitar tracks, we kind of, slammed the production so that you compensate a little bit when you're early in your career in that way, especially if you're not kind of confident that you know what you're doing. And what I found interesting about this time is like everything is very pared back. Like weren't too concerned. I really find the process of getting set up in a room and, pulling sounds, I find it really stifling to my creativity. I hate it. It just, like, if I'm in that space for too long, not being creative, I just want to leave. And for me, it's like it will stifle whatever potential good stuff that we're going to get out of us just by overthinking it. So I think if you've got some real fundamentals that like work well, so Sam's really good with like knowing how a space will work with like certain microphones, like knowing placement. So like he was really particular in like where the drum mics were, where we set up the amps so that there was as much separation as possible with the tracking. Like we experimented with a few places where we put the amps, but at the same time we didn't sit there for 4 hours kind of trying every combination and listening. We're just like, yep, that sounds right. And you got to trust your ears as well. I think once you're experienced enough, if you're in a space and it sounds good, it's going to sound good on the record if you've got the decent gear, So if you've got like a few great microphones, trust your ear. And like this, you can't overstate this. Like, just have players who know what they're doing. Like, I don't mean to like big note us, but it's like we've been doing this a while, and like it's just about like, we were using the gear that was already in the room. A lot of it, like all the amps and stuff. We didn't bring our own amps. It's the amps that are in this rehearsal space, which is a lovely little space that we're very lucky to have. But I feel like I can get my bass sound with my fingers and couple of pedals, maybe. I use a particular compressor pedal on everything, and it's same with guitar. Like if I kind of can tune the amp in a way that I'm happy with, I feel like I can sound the same pretty much on any guitar that I pick up. And so it's really about working on your own sound. I think if you do that and don't rely too much on the gear you're using, you will get the sound that you're after. And it's the same with Jack's kit. It's like his snare drum, like no one sounds like his snare drum. Like it's just so iconically Jack Gilligan, and it's such a joy to listen to. Yeah.
So cool. I love that simplicity, man. I really do. And I'm one of the few audio engineers that's like not super into gear. So I love to hear that. Yeah,
me too. And I often feel like maybe I'm, being left behind when a lot of people I know are kind of like, purchasing more and more stuff and have bigger and bigger studios. And you kind of feel like, oh, can I do this with what I've got? And then, but some of my favorite records are recorded with, nothing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I love that, man. I really love that. So obviously with like the pandemic and you back in Australia and Cam's in Malta and Jack in London, what do you think is next for Inuette?
Yep. That is the $1 million question, really. I mean, this is a little bit of a secret, but we have another record kind of tracked already, which is all new stuff. Well, it's I'd say it's like 60 or 70% done, and it was recorded a few years ago, but we haven't finished it. It's just kind of one of those things that when you're not in the same space, it's hard to really be motivated to kind of work on it. But I've got a whole bunch of stuff that, we've got guitar, uke, keys, bass, and drums for. We just need some vocals and some extra little kind of bits and pieces. So, I mean, that record could potentially come out at some point. It's pretty good. Again, it's kind of like it's all recorded live. Like a lot of it is tracked live, similar to how we did the last LP. But without the ability to play shows together, it kind of seemed like, well, what's the point in putting out a new record? But I guess something this year has taught us is like, well, there's more than one way to consume media. And so that's why I felt like we wanted to do this project. So maybe we'll release that. Ideally, I'd love to go back to London and play with the guys again. But I'm trying to be realistic about the possibility of world travel right now. So if people are really interested in the record and want to listen to it, that will give us motivation to do more. So that's all I can recommend.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's been really nice to catch up to you over the past hour or so, Jess. And I just have one last question for you before we wrap up the podcast. And is there like when you go into the studio or when you're writing music, is there any like impact that you want to leave on the audience, or is that something that you think about? And if there is, what would it be, do you think?
Jesus, great question. So I'm like notoriously bad at overthinking stuff, especially when I'm in the infancy of creating something. I'll kind of get wrapped up in like, okay, this is okay. I'm writing a song on guitar. How am I going to arrange it? Like, what am I like? How are people going to feel listening to it? How am I going to produce it? Like, when am I going to put it out? Like, how am I going to play it live? And then that kind of kills all that. Again, it kind of kills the creativity for me a bit. So what I've been really trying to do lately is really kind of not think about the big picture and not kind of go, okay, this isn't necessarily as good as the best thing I've ever done, but it's okay. It is what it is. And I guess the main thing I try and still focus on is like authenticity. Like, even though Inuit don't take ourselves seriously, we take our music seriously. Like, it's, we believe in it, even if it's funny. Like, some of my favorite music is quite funny. It makes you smile or laugh listening to it. And, it doesn't mean it's flippant or kind of like lacking depth. And so I think as long as you're kind of being true to yourself and know that the music's connecting with you, then it will connect with the audience. I try not to kind of think about how it might be received by anyone, because I've given up trying to kind of predict what people might or might not like. There's been some stuff I've done where I'm like, whatever. And then people go nuts for it. And there's some stuff I've done where I'm like, okay, this is like the best thing. And people kind of just don't get it. So yeah, you can't really you can't reverse engineer that shit. You just got to be true to yourself, I think.
Yeah. That's a great answer, man. So yeah, just before we wrap up, where can people find your music? Where should people follow you online, et cetera, et cetera?
So you can find me on Twitter at Jess Porter Solo, because I'm a loner. And Inuette is everywhere, like facebook.com/Inuette, INUETTE. Same on Spotify. Check it out. It's a good record. I'm proud of it.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Mike. It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Once again, I want to thank Jess for taking the time and having a great chat with me. Like I said, we haven't spoken for a few years, so it's really nice to catch up. And one thing that I love about Inuette, and if you go listen to their music, you'll hear it instantly, is, like Jess said, they have a real sense of humor in their music. And that's not to say that they don't take their music seriously, but there's just an underlying sense of humor in everything that they do. And it's something that I've never really felt comfortable with embodying in my music, and I really respect that they pull it off in such a genuine way, and a way that doesn't make it corny or over the top. There's just a level of humor throughout everything they do, and I find it really, really enjoyable to listen to. But at the same time, like Jess said, they still take their music very seriously, and they're all very talented musicians at the end of the day. So I really like that aspect about their work. The other thing that I really enjoyed that Jess said in this interview, and it's something that we kind of have a parallel, is he has a healthy disregard for gear. So many artists and audio engineers have gear acquisition syndrome, where they're just buying pedals and amps and mics and blah blah blah. And I love that Jess is just more concerned with how well they play, and knowing that if you play it right, you're gonna capture a decent signal and things will work out in the end. And I really have a huge level of respect for that, because I've witnessed so many people going so over the top. So it's really nice to just hear musicians just not really care about the gear that much. I hope that you check out their music and their new stuff, because I've seen a video from their upcoming album, and it's great. They recorded it in this what looks like an incredibly hot and sweaty practice space in London, and if you watch it, you'll also completely understand that sense of humor that runs throughout everything that they do. And thank you for listening to this podcast. You can follow me at MuseWorksAudio on Instagram. Visit me at www.museworksaudio.com if you want to listen to some of my previous work, if you're interested in working with me. And other than that, I'm signing off, and thank you for listening, and see you next week.